Welcome to the Autonomic Healing Podcast. I'm Tom Pells.
And I'm Ruth Lawrenson. We'll be unpacking what it looks like to activate your brain to holistically manage stress and trauma that bring healing to the mind, body, and spirit.
Being free to live authentically as humans.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started.
So on this conversation, we're going to be talking about intimacy. Mm-hmm. We're in the ABCs of thriving, and we're on the letter I. And the conversation, Tom, that we're going to have today is about inviting intimacy. Mm-hmm. And so do you want to kick us off with some initial thoughts about this? I love the topic. And, again, it's this core... there's so much resonance with what we've talked about before with rational intimacy. Mm-hmm. So we're going to tap into some of that. But yeah, start us off.
So the ABCs of thriving, as opposed to just surviving. And with the A, accept adversity. Stuff happens. People do things that often will be a barrier to intimacy. It compromises it. It makes it untouchable. It makes it something, I'm not going to risk that. Why would I do that? But then if we believe in beneficence and things that are beneficial, and even if they seem detrimental, doesn't mean they are necessarily detrimental. They may feel that way. Mm-hmm. And just because it feels beneficial doesn't mean it actually is. And discerning what is actually beneficial, and intimacy is beneficial. Because the alternative is no. And then create contentment. Stress and need. Think about what stress and need often do to intimacy.
Yeah.
Right. But if we can create, and as we create contentment, okay, then stress and need don't have to be non-starters when it comes to intimacy. And then defer to loving. And if we defer to loving, that does wonderful things for intimacy, because it's about being loving. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. But then what that does, of course, is it energizes empathy. And if there's anything about intimacy, it's empathy. Intimacy is an expression, when it's healthy and beneficial, of empathy. And we energize empathy. And as we energize empathy, we're setting ourselves up to invite intimacy, because people do stuff. I remember Simon and Garfunkel song. I bruise you, you bruise me. We both bruise too easily to let it show. I love you, and that's all I know. Bruising happens.
Yeah.
But if we forgive fearlessly, we can deal with intimacy, because it's two human beings connecting with each other. And that can be bruising. Then give generously. Pour out, express, right? And if intimacy involves anything, we're going to talk about it, it's giving.
Yeah.
And being willing to sacrifice. Things like that. We'll talk about that more. And then, of course, hope. How hopeful do you feel if you're isolated?
Well, we were just talking earlier, and I was saying to you that I think for me, when I boil my life down to what is satisfying and motivational in my life, it is the intimate relationships. All of the other stuff is great, but actually the thing that's really hopeful in my life, that's the substance, is really, when I think about the close group of people that I've got in my life, not many actually, but just enough, but they're real intimate relationships. That's what matters. Yes. That's what I can wake up in the morning and think, breathe in and feel like, I've got a great life,
And that connection between hope and homeostasis and health. Naturally, then the I becomes invite intimacy. And intimacy has often been described as a feeling of closeness, a willingness to openly share very personal thoughts with another person. And we can have that intimacy with self. Oftentimes we think of intimacy and it's always about others. But intimacy is about a person to a person connection.
And I'm a person.
And I am a people, as I like to say. I love people. I'm a people. Love people. Me. And I can be intimate in relationship with myself. If I'm not, how am I going to, or what does it even look like to be intimate with somebody else?
That's so important, I think, because there is, and I guess what that means is to be very real, be open, disclose to yourself the true, trust yourself enough to be intimate with yourself.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. That feeling, when I talked about intimacy, has often been described as a feeling of closeness. We often feel estrangement with ourselves. But we could be our own best friend and feel that closeness and a willingness to openly share intimate thoughts. How often don't we just suppress and repress? And criticize or find fault with. All of those things are barriers to intimacy, not just with others, but with ourselves. So intimacy is not just with others, but intimacy is with self. And intimacy is something to invite others to experience with us. See, the inviting intimacy. Oftentimes, intimacy isn't invited. Sometimes intimacy is expected.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking about this earlier, but I think for me in my life, reflecting on this topic, in the past, I've been caught or stuck in these spaces where I've not been, that it hasn't been invited. People
it's been expected.
Yeah, it's or just like there's a shut door, or someone doesn't want intimacy with me, or maybe we had intimacy and then it stopped, and so I think I can get really stuck on those places. But I think what I like about this conversation, Tom, is that actually really our only space that we can operate in terms of an empowering space anyhow is to know that it's down to, we can't decide what other people do, but we have this choice where we can invite intimacy with others. We can't expect that others will invite us into intimacy, but we can do that for others. And like, I love what you said there about we shouldn't expect intimacy. No. It's the same sort of thing, isn't it? It's like, actually we can invite it, but we can't expect it back.
No.
And an invitation is it's generous, isn't it? I've got a party going on.
Come on.
And come on in. Join the fun. Be part of this life-giving space. But I hold that lightly and I also honour this person in front of me to say, you have a choice whether you want to come or not.
And think about all those things that you were just sharing in terms of surviving or thriving.
Yeah.
The other, I hope I survive this.
Well, also, there's so much stress that can be around that.
And it feels threatening. And we sense it or perceive it as threatening if it's not invited. If it's expected, if it's and conditional. I have to do certain things or I can't do certain things. I have to act in certain ways. I can't act in other ways. I can't be me. But I can be me. And that's what the inviting is about.
Yeah.
Come as you are is the nature of this invitation to intimacy.
Yeah.
Come as you are.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think moving from that space of, which it can be incredibly stressful and, I think you can just focus in on those areas of lack of intimacy.
And that's surviving.
It is surviving, but
because
actually...
it's loneliness, it's isolation, it's not connecting. Yeah.
But to live in a way where you're thinking, it's a really different frame of mind to live in a way of going, actually, I'm not going to focus on all of that stuff, but I will focus. I'm waking up today and I'm like, where am I going to invite people into intimacy with me? That's a really different, life-giving, light way of living, I think.
And what we just described was forgive fearlessly, give generously, hope, homeostasis, and health. So we invite people into that to experience that with us and experience it ourselves. And success in forming intimate connections leads to a sense of belonging and emotional fulfillment.
Which is so important for humans.
To be human.
Yeah.
And to thrive.
And to thrive, because that's the difference. When we're surviving, there's a loneliness, there's an isolation, there's the stress, there's the focus of what isn't, what instead of what can be. But this thriving space of relationships and a sense of belonging, a sense of actually
emotional fulfillment.
Yeah, emotional fulfillment, empowerment.
Yes.
There is a really different space to live in.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a little. I mean, we described intimacy, and so we're talking about this space where you can really be yourself, and you can feel. We're talking about there's love is in the center of intimacy.
Yes, and
right?
I love the quote by a psychoanalyst, Erik Erikson. Love is the only sane and satisfactory answer to the problem of human existence.
Wow.
Can I say that again? Slowly. Love is the only sane and satisfactory answer to the problem of human existence. And inviting intimacy is about love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And loving to ourselves, to others, and an acceptance of who those people are. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess the questions I have, Tom, as someone who's just like a punter. Mm-hmm. Do you have that phrase, punter? Mm-mm. In England, it's like...
Oh, punting. I've gone punting on the River Cam.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah.
I think it's a British phrase. Anyway, as what I mean is Joe Blogs, like just someone who's in the general population who isn't a therapist. I've got some questions about intimacy because I guess I can see, like, I can totally see the benefits. I love this word invite instead of expect, but I think that people struggle with intimacy.
Yeah.
That you have adults and people who they can fear rejection. They feel like, oh my, I've experienced that. I feel like I have to kind of have a self-talk with myself. If I have to encourage myself to invite intimacy, because it doesn't come naturally to me. It comes with a lot of choice. I have to choose
intentionality,
intimacy, even though a lot of my fears or seemingly rational perceptions might tell myself to get the heck out of there. What am I doing? Why am I so crazy to trust that space,
Right.
So can we speak into a little bit of that? Like, yes. Why is that there? And how do we have some level of understanding of that? And then how do we approach it?
Yep. Erik Erikson postulated a stages of psychosocial development. And this begins in infancy. But I think it's a lifelong expression. If it's successful in those developmental stages of human existence, and remember, love is the only sane and satisfactory answer to the problem of human existence. And if there is love from the onset, then the direction of intimacy is established or compromised. So with Erik Erikson, his stages of psychosocial development, during infancy, it's an issue of trust versus mistrust.
Wow.
And we develop that as infants. Trust or mistrust.
So this is babies. We're talking babies.
Yeah. Is this safe? Am I safe? Am I loved? Am I cared for? Am I nurtured? Am I taken care of? Are my wants and needs going to be addressed? Do I matter? And that can be an issue of trust or mistrust. And think about intimacy from the perspective of trust versus mistrust.
Well, it's incredibly difficult to access intimacy or invite it if there's mistrust.
Yeah, there'd be a reluctance or even a resistance to it.
Yeah.
And then in toddlerhood, there is autonomy versus shame and doubt. And when I say autonomy and shame and doubt, when it comes to intimacy, what do shame and doubt do to intimacy? I'm not going to connect with you because I'm ashamed. And I'm doubting and I'm insecure and I'm uncertain. And do I want to risk intimacy? No. But if there is autonomy, that sense of empowerment, and I can. And that's the kind of thing, interestingly, that Erik Erikson postulated occurs in toddlerhood. So think of a little toddler walking and autonomy versus shame and doubt, or playing with blocks. I picture a little toddler and remember doing this and building a little block tower. And autonomy versus shame and doubt. If your little block tower falls down, is the response, what? It's just a block tower. Were you stupid or something? You can't even build. You can't put one thing on top of another. As opposed to, let's rebuild it. Let's try again. Let's have a go at that. And when I was thinking through, and I hadn't visited Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development since the late 1990s when I was in graduate school, but it is relevant. And I think of my own kids and my son's phrase, that's a good idea, I think. And then that was during his toddlerhood, where my daughter with, I do it. I do. And that sense of autonomy and capability and capacity and empowerment and that sort of thing. And that is built on trust. Then you have autonomy. You have the settings for intimacy. Yeah.
But actually, even, and you've just shared two stages there, baby, infancy and toddlerhood. And it totally makes sense. But then it also makes total sense as to why people, have really significant,
issues.
Issues and not to say that they don't even desire it. I think a lot of people
they do desire it. They want it and long for it.
But can they? It feels out of reach, and that's because in those spaces, for a lot of people, those things were, they didn't have autonomy. They had the shame and what was the other word?
Mistrust.
The mistrust, even at the toddler stage.
Yes,
but go on, because I know
they never successfully completed those stages, so they couldn't progress on. That's the theory.
Yeah.
So then the next one that occurs during preschool is initiative or guilt. And now it shifts from shame to guilt. Shame is the interpersonal reaction. Guilt is the sense of having done something wrong. And the criticism, condemnation, or the learning. And okay, but how about this? And that initiative versus guilt, and how that occurs at a preschool age. But if we don't learn during preschool how to share our milk and cookies and things like that, you have adults who don't know how to share.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, and initiative. I can take the initiative. I can move forward. Or the guilt, which is, I'm going to screw that up, or you're going to screw that up, and don't screw that up.
It's crazy to me, Tom, that even at this age, we're talking elementary, there's this level of, guilt is this kind of, I don't know whether I'm saying the right words, but this self-doubt, or this I'm bad, or
yes,
I'm going to, like you say, I'm going to screw it up, even at that age. And that can be present if there isn't that affirming, foundational
love,
place of love, with parenting or
love, okay,
family.
Yeah. And then if there is the trust and autonomy and initiative, then the next stage during elementary school will be industry versus inferiority. And industry, being industrious, building, doing, things like that, as opposed to inferiority, And
Like I haven't
I'm
got,
no
I don't
good.
matter. I'm not able to achieve anything bigger than myself.
So I'm not going to try, or I'm going to try, but I think I'm going to fail, and it's not going to be, and I feel inferior. There's something wrong with, as opposed to industry. And so the mistrust, the doubt, the guilt, the inferiority, what's that going to do to intimacy? We're not going to invite intimacy. We would struggle to even have intimacy with ourselves if those are the cases. But if there's trust and autonomy and shame and initiative and industry, then the next stage, which usually occurs during adolescence, is identity versus role confusion. Who am I?
Wow.
Who am I? And think about adolescence.
Yeah.
Identity? Who am I?
Yeah.
Am I who you think? Role confusion. Am I who you think I should be? And that's my identity? Or is it, I know who I am?
So a crucial stage in adolescence is if in that stage people are able to healthily journey towards finding out who they are, as opposed to becoming who mum or dad, for example, wanted them to be, which happens a lot.
Me.
Then actually they're able, it sets them up in life to be far more able to invite intimacy. Whereas the opposite, if you've had this kind of role confusion, it's going to have a problem later in life. There's going to be some level of hurdle to intimacy.
Yeah. Identity. One of the things that when I was in high school, because I struggled because of childhood trauma and that sort of thing with mistrust and doubt and guilt and inferiority, because of traumas that I experienced as a toddler, certainly in preschool and during adolescence with being bullied and abused and all sorts of stuff. When it came to identity in high school, my identity was what pleased people, what I was good at, what they applauded me for, not what I wanted. Curious thing, this was in the early stages of counseling, and they had come up with aptitude tests. And I had that when I was in high school. It was an early thing. What are you good at? What are your interests? What do you resonate with? And that sort of thing. And I remember that one of the things I was really great at was singing. But what showed up on the aptitude tests were, wait for it, psychology and theology. And I eventually got around to that, but my bachelor's degree was in vocal performance and choral conducting. Why? Because that was my identity.
Yeah.
But it wasn't me. It wasn't my identity. That was an identity that I was supposed to have, that I should have. And I eventually got around to, oh, wait a minute, this is me. And the theology, 14 years as a minister, and a master of divinity, and then psychology? Yeah.
This is so helpful. I think even just as a parent, I've got a teenager, and just thinking about the importance of this stage for him and to find out who he is. And we had a little chat yesterday. We went for a little walk around the block, and he was just, he asked me if I was ever shy. And I said, well, sometimes. And I said, are you shy? And he said, yeah, well, I am sometimes, because I'm not sure whether people accept me. And I had this little chat with him, and I said, actually what I've learned as time's gone on, and it's taken me a long time, is that the best thing you can ever be is just yourself. And then you'll get people who like that person. And then there'll be others that won't really want anything to do with it. And you know what? Those people aren't meant to be in your life. And he gave me this big hug, and it was a really sweet moment. But I just now, even just with you sharing this, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually cultivating something, a gift for him later in life, to be able, I think when I look at my life, I'm, in my late 40s now, and I feel like I wish that I didn't spend so many years not being able to access healthy intimacy.
But it is what
and
it
is. And it is what it is. But I think when we think about our kids or our grandkids,
that
we
for
can
them. Cultivate that.
Cultivate that.
Invited intimacy in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You did.
Yeah.
And it was reciprocated.
Yeah.
It was responded to. And then what can happen in young adulthood is intimacy versus isolation. And of course, if there's trust and autonomy and initiative and industry and identity, there can be intimacy. Because you have a person, someone, you, for who you are, to invite others to be in relationship with. But if there is that mistrust and doubt and guilt and inferiority and role confusion, of course there will be isolation. Not only are you not going to throw a party, why would I, and who would come anyway? So I'll just be alone.
Be on my own, yeah.
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 So that's something that hopefully happens in young adulthood. A circle of friends, a family, you have children, or you have partnerships and things like that, or it's some of what looks like that, but it isn't that. And it's not experienced and enjoyed. It's something that's almost spectated. Watching it happen, but not being present in it intimately. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
These all seem like they're like foundational layers, aren't they?
Yep.
It's like this staircase to intimacy. And actually, if you have a few missing stairs, then it's not to say you can't get there eventually, but actually, you can see, that picture of a staircase towards being a healthy intimacy in adult life, you need these steps in the phases of life.
And rational intimacy, as the paradigm, starts with a sense of contentment, where you feel secure and capable. Yes, there's stress and need, but there's contentment. Think about that related to intimacy. And then grace, emotional composure, and expression of gifting and capability, and think of that with intimacy. And then engagement, connection, involvement, where you feel that sense of being influential, where you felt secure and capable and content, and then you felt empowered, and then you were with the influence and the connection and involvement, you're influential, and then that self-image and self-esteem. Yeah. And it's healthy, it's sober, and then you can envision possibilities. And the possibilities here are, I can invite intimacy. And then the next stage in rational intimacy is rational intimacy. And it's stepping into living out that vision of what can be, and inviting other people to share that with you. Yeah.
And one of the things, I know you whizzed through that just a minute, the rational intimacy part. And, but I think it is actually quite fascinating that with Erik Erikson, his stages, if you look at, and I just encourage the listeners, if you haven't listened, we've done a ton of episodes on rational intimacy. We went through it with a fine, all of the different stages, and they're actually they're very much aligned to the same sort of thing as Erik Erikson.
Because it's a basic human psychosocial dynamics.
So just encourage the listeners, if you're interested in the different phases and the different levels of rational intimacy, go back and listen to some of those episodes, because I'm sure that'll be helpful for you.
Yeah. So intimacy is thriving, and isolation is surviving, hopefully, and forming those close bonds with others. Being comfortable with mutual dependency, because that's what intimacy is about. Mutual support. meeting mutual needs, being there for others, and them being there for you.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to be open and share with others, a willingness to commit to relationships, and make personal sacrifices for the sake of those relationships. The core strength at this stage in rational intimacy is empowerment. We feel empowered to form close bonds with others.
Yeah.
We feel empowered to be comfortable with mutual dependency. If you're empowered, I can depend on you. You can depend on me. Empowered to do that. The ability to be open and share with others. If I feel empowered and view myself and sense myself as empowered, I'm willing to be open and share with others, not defensive.
And honestly feel like you can share openly and honestly because you're not going to be rejected. You know, it's like there's so much value in this, isn't there? There's so much about knowing your value yourself and that other people value you too. And then out of that, there's that freedom.
And if we feel and sense ourselves and view ourselves as empowered, there is a willingness to commit to relationships. Mm-hmm. People who don't commit to relationships are people who don't feel empowered.
That's so true.
I can't do that. Mm-hmm. Yes. And then, especially with the last characteristic, if we are empowered, we can and want to make personal sacrifices for the sake of the relationship. Why? Because it's not a survival scarcity mentality. It's an empowered, I'm there for you, you're there for me, and I'm willing to sacrifice for the health and well-being and ongoing journey that is intimacy. See how I set up for our next conversation with that?
I did. So, close us out then.
Yes. So, with all of that we've been talking about, the J is joy in the journey.
Which will be next time.
Yes, because if we invite intimacy and we experience those kind of things we've been talking about, we get to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, Tom. I love that. Well, I'm looking forward. Well, I'm not going to wait till next time to have joy. I'm going to live it now, but we will talk about joy in the journey next time around. And I think that there's just been some real golden nuggets here in this, inviting intimacy and let us live in that way where daily we're thinking through the right people that we choose to invite intimacy with.
And I would be completely remiss, especially with talking about inviting intimacy, that if our listeners have questions or wonderings about or want it, please reach out. We're inviting intimacy. Reach out. I'd love to respond.
Yeah.
And have conversation about that.
Yeah. We'll absolutely answer any questions in these episodes and these conversations.
Reach out.
Yeah, that would be great.
From the website, you can, and the connection where you got your thing, I think there's a way to connect with us.
Yeah, there's absolutely
Please
a way.
do.
Yeah. So you can find all of our information in our link tree. So just go into that space and there's an email, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. But looking forward to our next conversation, Tom.
We'll enjoy it.
We will enjoy it. The joy in the journey.
You've been listening to the Autonomic Healing Podcast.
Join us next time as we continue in our conversations with Tom. If you're interested in pursuing your own autonomic healing journey and want to find a practitioner, visit our website, innerworkings.org. See you at the next episode.